Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. I'll remind you as well to join the mailing list just in case YouTube shuts me down. And I send out a weekly newsletter updating you on the most important stories of the week as I see it. But it's just as I see it, so I could miss things. Who knows, right? And don't forget to join in the conversation. We've got a forum, very active forum with lots of interesting conversations. There's a general section too. This is just the federal politics section, but you could join us, have a conversation. It's free. We'd love to have you. All right, let's get into the news. So what is going on? Ottawa Citizen says Canada is approaching 4 months without a Governor General. Can we do that? Well, we are doing that. It's kind of like the horses are out of the barn, right? Are they allowed to be out of the barn? I don't know. They're out of the barn though. So, what's going to happen? The position of the Governor General still exists, and there's somebody who's occupying it right now, as far as I understand it. It was like the undersecretary is like stepping in because the figurehead still exists. So, but it's a ceremonial, I guess it's more ceremonial in position most of the time, unless the Prime Minister goes to the Governor General and says, we're having an election, you need to dissolve Parliament, right? I don't know if you need a Governor General who is put in place by a Prime Minister to facilitate that, or if it can be a Governor General who's there placeholding. I don't know why they're dragging their feet on it as well. You can't find another astronaut. I don't know. I don't get it. Why not appoint somebody right away? I mean, no time to vet them to make sure that they're on board to play the whatever game we're playing, right? You know what I mean? All right, getting into elections. So I don't know if we can do that, but it seems we are doing it. And it doesn't seem like there's going to be any end to that, but it also doesn't seem like they're going to abolish the Governor General position. So I don't know. We're in kind of a limbo state, but we're kind of in a limbo state with everything, right? Do you have any holidays booked? Right? I don't know. Right? No, I don't think so. Anyway, election. This is the election tabs. This is election reform was something that Trudeau campaigned on quite enthusiastically, and now we've got somebody who broke election laws partially in charge of that, or at least in a high position with the ability to influence it, and that's notable. That's interesting. Here we go.
In a riding that's been decided by less than 50 votes in recent years, the member for Winnipeg North was found guilty of breaking elections law for running illegal ads on Election Day, influencing the vote of some 35,000 people on their way to the polls. It's completely inappropriate for this same member to be the parliamentary secretary in charge of changing Canada's elections laws for all candidates in 338 ridings across the country when he can't be bothered to follow our existing laws. Canadians expect our elections to be the global standard for unquestionable integrity. How can this government be trusted to ensure the integrity of our elections and have the best interest for Canadians at the front of mind when they will recklessly break current laws for their own benefit? Canadians deserve better. These Liberals break the law whenever they think they can get away with it because they believe they are above the rules that the rest of us follow. A Conservative government will bring back ethics and good governance to Parliament Hill and restore Canadians' confidence in their public institutions.
So a little
writing that's been
campaign style speech, right? Little campaigny style speech. I think that he's got a point. I don't know that the end stump there, the end part of his speech, I don't know if that is accurate from Mr. O'Toole's leadership. I haven't seen any indication of that, although we do see some fire from Poilievre and from Mr. Barrett as well. So and a few other ones, Mr. Cooper. But when he's not having statements removed from the official record because, reasons. Right? Reasons. And it's funny because I wouldn't even mention it had they just let it be. But otherwise, you have to mention it, right? Election 44, MPs wary of Election 44 bill that could see returning officers accept millions of mailed ballots after the polls close. What could possibly be wrong with that? What could happen? What could happen? It's not like we've seen an example of this in recent history. It's not like that went absolutely brutal. It's not like they're in the middle of a recount right now or anything like that. What could happen? What could happen, right? What ballots under the table? So if you pair Mr. Barrett's statement with what's going on with the election stuff, you could reasonably come to a conclusion that there's potential issues with our process, right? That's the conclusion that I would come to, right? But I'm just a guy in my garage. Who am I, right? Who am I? Joel Blitt which is a very easy last name, and I think I nailed it, says, how are Canadians not more upset about the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, CEWS? Oh, sorry, hold on. CEWS. These transfers to firms are set to cost us $110.6 billion, more than Ottawa spends on child benefits, healthcare transfers, equalization benefits, or pandemic support for individuals. How is it there's so little transparency around the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy? $110 billion of spending, and Canadians don't know who it's going to? Kudos to these guys who broke this story in the Globe and Mail. I'm not surprised. Like, we went 2 years without a budget. And then the budget that we got delivered, the parliamentary budget officer, Yves Giroux, was like, most of this needs a redo. Like, if I were grading this, it would be like a generous D, but it should be an F, right? Like, all of that is not right. Try again, Ms. Freeland, try again. So $110 billion of slush money going to wherever and whoever and no oversight. I mean, what could go wrong? What could go wrong, right? Here is Brian Lilley saying, this is amazing. Aaron O'Toole calls out the left. And Mr. O'Toole is calling out the pipelines and Elizabeth May. Elizabeth May makes a long, impassioned speech about Line 5, and she's talking about how we're not trying to blockade a pipeline. We're trying to protect the environment of a potential oil spill of this Enbridge pipeline that has been functioning for 65 years without issue and is buried. It goes out to the Straits of Mackinac, right? But I think that's where it is. But anyway, Mr. O'Toole is trying to respond to this, saying that that's not a plan for global warming. That's not a plan to reduce carbon. That's a plan for taking a safe pipeline and replacing it with unsafe rail transport of this oil, of this resource that we need. And that doesn't make a lot of sense. But I think it's interesting that Mr. O'Toole says that he's got a plan when his plan is a carbon tax. And how many tons of CO2 has BC removed with their carbon tax since 2008? And the answer is none, but it's got a $1.9 billion shadow economy that's the carbon tax economy. And that might be nice if you could buy into that. It's like buying into futures that are kind of limited but guaranteed to go up. Like, you can't really get into the futures market, but once you get into it, it's going to be increasing, right? Because people need carbon, right? I think that it's a very interesting situation. I'll show you about a minute of this. You can make up your own mind about what Mr. O'Toole is saying. I don't know about amazing Brian Lilley. I think before we go into this, we should note this, okay? And hold on, here we go. This is better. Yeah, right? Did anybody watch Stranger Things? Okay, it's the Stranger Things meme where she writes on the chalkboard or on the whiteboard, and it says the carbon that they want to reduce is you. Okay, it's you. They don't have a viable alternative to this. Taxing carbon doesn't work to reduce carbon. This is fundamentally an anti-human agenda, and it took a long time for me to see it that way, and I think that is fundamentally what it boils down to. I think that's the core of this is that. Anyway, here's Aaron O'Toole.
Emit greenhouse gases, so that is not a plan. This is the trouble with the ideological left, and I include the government in that group of parties there. They're against everything, and they have no real ideas or credibility on how to actually reduce emissions while keeping hundreds of thousands of Canadians employed, how to innovate, how to lower carbon intensity. You can't just shut down everything. But when you're part of a party, whether the Bloc Québécois or the Green, that will never be in government, you can live in fantasy. But when you're in government like this government for almost 6 years, Mr. Speaker, their fantasy is dividing this country. It's making us less prosperous. And when they can't even defend a pipeline that has operated safely for weeks or years, and we have to bring an emergency debate, it shows that this tired, incompetent government needs to go.
Well, I mean, sure, but are you going to replace it with O'Toole, who's going to do exactly the same thing with maybe a little more competence in pushing the envelope in other places that Trudeau wouldn't dare, right? So, yeah, I think that fundamentally that. And maybe Trudeau's done and he wants to have O'Toole take over. Who knows? But I don't think that is far off. And I don't necessarily think that carbon taxes are a way to effectively do what Mr. O'Toole is trying to sell to people. So this was released. This is some green text from 4chan. It was released on October 17th, 2020. So before the 2020 election. I read it then. I shared it with a couple of friends, and I thought it was interesting. One of the core kind of things about this document is it says white supremacists are going to be blamed for terrorist acts across the United States and across the West in order to get the guns. Okay, so this is, conspiracy theory, right? So read at your own risk of falling into the conspiracy, right? So, but I'll have you know, I think that maybe the language has trickled its way up into the leadership of Canada, at least anyway. Jagmeet Singh says there's a link that exists between anti-maskers and far-right extremism. I was talking about this yesterday. Here's Jagmeet Singh talking about just that. Here we go.
Look at a designation for those groups or a way for national security to perhaps deal with them in a more aggressive...
Actually, I think I'm going to back it up a bit because this is worthwhile watching. He talks about, the beginning of this talks about, it's kind of soft language. It's at the end where he gets pointed with it. The newspaper goes with the little soft language at the beginning, but I want you to pay attention to the pointed language at the end, okay? Because that's the point of this little segment. Okay, here we go.
Yes, I do think that there is an connection with people who aren't wearing a mask or who aren't following public health guidance and the extreme right, and the idea that folks in the extreme right don't care about people around them, aren't concerned about the safety and well-being of people, generally their neighbors and the people in the community, and to brazenly not follow public health guidelines puts people at risk, and that is something that we've seen with extreme right-wing ideology, putting people at risk, not being concerned about the safety of others, not being concerned about the welfare of others. There is a connection, certainly.
Do you think that the public safety agency or the federal government needs to look at a designation for those groups or a way for national security to perhaps deal with them in a more aggressive way than they are now, just given that they continue to happen across the country as we're in such a kind of deadly third wave?
Pursuing any extreme right-wing groups that are radicalizing people or that are putting Canadian safety at risk, and any white supremacist groups, I think that should happen all the time. That's an important risk to Canadians, and that we have to consider it as serious as it is, and it has been ignored for too long. So that is something that we should do. Extreme right-wing groups, white supremacist groups that are taking advantage of opportunities to radicalize people, to create division and hatred, those groups are a real threat, and they should absolutely be pursued. Yes.
So the beginning of that started with Jagmeet Singh talking about right-wing people not caring about other people and flouting COVID rules, and it ended with yes. And somebody's cut this together. Pundit class cut this together. So there's a press conference there, but this press conference took place within the same time period. Like these were questions that led to one another. There's a flow, makes sense. So it started with tying right-wing people to not caring about other people. They don't care about other people. They'll float the rules. That floating of the rules, despite somebody having an exemption or feeling faint or having COPD or asthma or anything like that, what they're doing is floating the rules, and they're right-wing extremists, right? And then he jumps in the next question: should anything be done about that? And that is paraphrased, right? And he goes into white supremacy groups. And I think that the use of that language is notable because it is being used everywhere. I'll show you examples, but it's being used everywhere. And what's a white supremacy group that's operational currently in Canada? I don't know, or in Ontario, let's say, because I don't know. I don't know anything about BC white supremacy or Alberta white supremacy, really. But let's talk about it. Where is it? Can you put the links to the websites in the description? I don't know where they are, right? I would love to know what the Canadian government is talking about. I would love to know what Jagmeet Singh is talking about. What white supremacy groups? Who are they radicalizing? Who are they inciting to do what exactly? Right? Are they attacking Asians? Like, what? What is happening? And I don't understand these. I do understand, but it's interesting within the context of he's saying, oh, of course, everybody knows that, this is a big problem and has been ignored for far too long. What specifically? What specifically is being attributed to white supremacists that's been a big problem that's been ignored in Canada for far too long? He's making these statements like we all know what he's talking about. I have no idea what he's talking about. No clue. And I think that people should push back on this rather than saying, oh yeah, I guess Canadians are real racist. They didn't used to be. I wonder what happened. It's really interesting. White supremacy? White supremacy. What about demographics of the country, right? Does that come into play at all? Ezra Levent says, I see plenty of organic hippie types in the anti-lockdown protests. RFK Jr., Naomi Wolf, people who aren't in the thrall of big pharma. Sure, there are don't tread on me conservatives, but 100,000 marching in Montreal were pretty liberal. Jagmeet Singh actually is an extremist. Yeah, so Jagmeet Singh was denied a visa to visit India. And why was that? Why was that? The Indian consulate said people who seek to undermine Indian democratic institutions and foment contempt to the country, its constitution, and its judiciary are only misusing the pretext of human rights to pursue their insidious agenda of disturbing the social fabric of India and undermining the peace, harmony, and territorial integrity of India, he wrote. And then Singh went to the Indian, what's it called? The Indian, hold on, let me find the word. Consulate. Just was beyond reach. Anyway, he went to the Indian consulate, sat there for half an hour, got ignored, and then he left. And in response to the Globe and Mail asking for a comment from the Indian consul, they responded, quote, anyone indulging in directly or indirectly attacking India's sovereignty and territorial integrity is not welcome to India, Mr. Mishra said. He avoided using Mr. Singh's name in his email, which did have the title, Re Jagmeet Singh. Interesting, right? So, but he's in government and he's telling you that white supremacy is the biggest threat to Canada. I would love some specifics, sir. I would love some numbers. How many people has white supremacy killed in the last 6 months? More than opium? No? Which group? Anyway, Kovinder Kaur says, Dr. Kaur Gill, I think, says, my challenge for an open evidence-based public debate with any politician regarding unscientific, unconstitutional lockdowns and restrictions causing horrific harms if disgracefully calling me and others neo-Nazis, racists, white supremacists is all you've got, then you've utterly lost already. Actually, she said you've already utterly lost. That's what they've got. That's what they're doing. That's the play. I don't know what the end game is yet, but don't read that green text. Okay? Kelly Brown says, if you don't have a science-based argument, and the science-based is in quotes, in support of lockdowns or masks, just call the opposition white racist extremism and neo-Nazis. This is how you make it taboo to support anti-lockdown movements. The House of Cards is crumbling. Have a great weekend, everyone. So this is Charlie Angus saying, thank you to Nenshi for calling it as it is. These anti-maskers don't care about your small business. Dehumanizing. They're saying these people don't care about you. Their preachers aren't worried about your soul. They're disingenuous, right? They're preachers, but they don't care about you. This white racist extremism using the biggest medical crisis in a century to build a hate movement. Specifically, Mr. Charlie Angus? Specifically who? Which hate movement? The anti-lockdown pro-freedom movement? The Canada We Once Knew movement? Ooh, that's a good one. Hashtag Canada We Once Knew. I like that. Who? I think the radicalized ones are the people spewing this garbage on Twitter. Dr. Fissman says a good read from Nora Leto on Nora Leo. Anyway, I think I've been blocked from her. On close linkages between anti-vaxxers, anti-maskers, and neo-Nazis in Canada. Media needs to start calling this for what it is. And I've just shown you that the media sanitizes what is said. Jagmeet Singh's clearly targeted white supremacists without actually targeting any specific group, just white supremacists, which, do you know any? Like, who? And I mean, like, do you know any groups? Do you hear of them in a church basement somewhere, right? Like, who are these people? Where do they meet? Where are their websites? Where are their social media? Where are their Facebook groups? I could point you to Antifa. Where's the white supremacist ones? How many hundreds of people do they have to be the biggest threat in Canada right now? How many thousands of people? Seriously. Here's another global news. One attendee was carrying a white supremacist flag. What's a white supremacist flag? Is there a white supremacist? Like there's a trans flag and there's a blue line flag. Where's the white supremacist flag? I've never seen a white supremacist flag. I've never seen something that I've gone, oh, there's the white supremacist flag. Global Calgary says those people at those anti-mask protests, let's not kid ourselves, they're not people who are protesting because they need to eat. They're people who are marching in thinly veiled white nationalist, supremacist, anti-government protests. And then she said, it was a mess of words. It was a word salad of whatever he could get in there, right? It was funny to actually watch because he was stumbling over it and he sounded stupid, but the content of it is concerning because that's what he's trying to get you to believe. Wild. This is where we're at, right? Who is the enemy when they're rolling this out? And what are they using? The data to justify this is as good as the data to justify lockdowns. Could you tell us how full our ICUs are, please, Public Health Toronto? Could you tell us how full our ICUs are compared to the last 5 years? Oh, they're at 5-year lows? Oh, isn't that interesting? Why are we locked down again? I'll show you in the redacted show, but it has to do with a triple mutant something. And that's funny. It's funny. It's like we're in a video game. It's like you're in Grand Theft Auto and you're one of the characters that goes to work and back and like you hope not to get caught in the crossfire, you know, as you're driving down the road and the Grand Theft Auto car comes down and like, you're like, oh, that was interesting, right? We're in a video game. The triple mutant variant. Come on. Ridiculous. Okay, anyway, back to the racism. Balaclava put together this thread and he says, you know that Team Swamp is losing when they try to distract from their corruption, lies, and failings by playing the racist white supremacist card. Don't allow them to divert your attention. It is, in fact, COVID Inc. that's racist and more accurately classist. So he goes through his proof of saying that COVID lockdowns actually disproportionately affect lower income, and he says like BIPOC people. I don't even like the term BIPOC. I think it's as bad as like it's a term designed by white people to encompass everybody they're trying to help or something to that effect. I don't understand how everybody's embraced this term as like the new classification of Black, Indigenous. Like if I was a Black person, I would be like, please refer to me as a Black person and not a BIPOC person. Like you can shove BIPOC up here or whatever. And like if I was an Indigenous person, the same. I'd be like, why isn't it whatever? Like I don't know. And not really. Like I'm not that petty, but I think that it's a stupid idea. Like, oh, you know that group of people that we're trying to help by turning society on its head? We're just going to group them all into this acronym. Like they all belong in this acronym for us to easily identify them. It defies reason. It's like saying this budget is a feminist budget and we're doing this to help women get into business because, you know, we've identified that as being a problem for women. That's not helpful. That's insulting to women. Like that is not the way to, one, build good businesses, and two, give help to women. Like if you want to give help to women, fine, but don't name your budget the feminist budget and then say, you know, because women, you need so much help, wink, we're going to give it to you. What? Like it just defies reason. It is insanity. It is complete round the bend insanity. And maybe it's me. Maybe I interpret things in the wrong way entirely. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong. Maybe, but in my hot take, how this looks to me is just nuts. Okay, last one. How do you know the pro-lockdown and face mask crowd are losing the war and getting increasingly desperate? They're now using identity politics instead of science in their arguments. Let me explain how public health infectious disease documents, not lockdown skeptics, are fascists. And he talks about well, I'll go through this thread. Let's start with the parasite hypothesis, which explains why authoritarian governments are more likely to emerge in regions characterized by high prevalence of disease-causing pathogens. Studies also show parasite prevalence predicts measures of authoritarian governments. Hitler, leader of the Nazis, was a germaphobe and obsessed with the idea of infection. He avoided personal contact and is said to have bathed 4 times a day. He also referred to Jews as parasites that infected nations. These are traits linked to authoritarian ideologies, not to skeptics. And part of it as well is linking your enemy with something disgusting like parasites. It dehumanizes and it makes the public not fear they're in disgust. And what do you do with blankets or something like that have been soiled by a very sick child or something? You clean them, right? You clean them in hot water, and you get rid of it. And Jordan Peterson makes a better argument about this and explains it better than I am right now. But disgust is what you want to foster against your enemy, because then they're not afraid of the enemy. They just want to stay away from, get rid of, right? It's psychological. It's a very well-known tactic, and it's frightening. It's frightening that it's being used. Okay, anyway, being used today. This is an explanation of Hitler, but it's being used today, right? With COVID, same thing, same pattern. 4. These traits are also seen in other extremist or racist ideologues, such as the leaders of the KKK and Trump. I don't necessarily agree with the Trump one there, but okay. Do you now understand the similarity between Nazis and fascists and the public health infectious disease docs peddling lockdowns and masks? Lockdowns and face masks, skeptics argued that the data never has in the past, and quite ironically, after 14 months of both interventions being employed, still doesn't support their use as an effective measure to reduce cases and mortality related to a respiratory virus. Using science and data to oppose tyrannical restrictions that are essentially useless has absolutely nothing to do with neo-Nazism. In fact, those that impose and support those oppressive restrictions that not only kill livelihoods but people themselves are the real neo-Nazis and fascists. And he says, I think that the real question we should be asking is, if all the people that impose and support lockdowns and face masks were alive during Nazi rule, whose side would they be on? Would they help the Nazis and round up the Jews, or would they help rescue and save the Jews? And this guy says he'd fall in line because that's what people do. And I think that's another point that Dr. Peterson makes as well. If you were alive back then, you would do what the zeitgeist is telling you to do, what the public are telling you to do. What you're doing now is what you would have done then. So very interesting times. Very interesting times. So anyway, Dan Albus says, getting into free speech, the minister who last week labeled any and all criticism of Bill C-10 as misleading Canadians this week acknowledges the minister says he should have been more precise in the words he used. Whoops. So I think I showed footage of the minister repealing or being told to fix this in the House of Commons, and he tried one way, and they said, no, you have to actually take that back. So he did. Oh, okay, I take it back. Roman Baber says the CPSO clarified its recent statement. The college says it intends to target a small group of physicians, and among other things, took issue with 2 anti-sentiments, but it didn't intend to stifle healthy debate about other measures. Try again, the CPSO. And so this is the letter from CPSO that was updated, and it basically says, we're targeting Dr. Gil Kaur, and we're targeting any other doctors who talk out about this, but if you don't talk out about this, don't worry about it. It says, good afternoon. I wanted to send a quick note to clarify the intentions and address misrepresentations of our recent statement on social media misinformation. As you know, the college has been working hard to implement a right-touch approach to how we regulate. We've been clear about the important role physicians play in advocating for change. The recent college statement was intended to address communications from a small group of physicians spreading blatant misinformation and putting the public at risk by voicing anti-vaccine and anti-masking sentiments and promoting unsupported, unproven treatments. It is not intended to stifle physicians from engaging in a healthy public debate about other measures aimed at addressing public safety during the pandemic. Those 2 statements contradict each other. It's as simple as that. They contradict. One says one thing, and the other says another thing that is the opposite of the first thing. We'd love for you to have the ability to discuss things, just not these things. But we don't want to stifle free speech. But don't talk about these things. CPSO. Contradictory statements. I'm not surprised. It's just frustrating, right? I'm not surprised. It's just frustrating. And yeah, and to not be surprised is disappointing, right? Okay. It is not intended to stifle physicians from engaging in healthy public debate about other measures aimed at addressing public safety during the pandemic. Just not those ones. The college statement is intended to focus on professional behavior and responsible communication. Our focus is on addressing those arguments that reject scientific evidence and seek to rouse emotions over reason at a time when the population's health is at risk. We continue to recognize the important roles physicians can play by advocating for change in a socially accountable manner. If you require further clarification regarding the statement or have any other questions or concerns, as always, please feel free to contact us. I think that they'll be contacted. I think they will. Here is Randy Hillier saying, moving into long-term care and mismanagement. Many people wonder why the COVID fraud continues to cover up, and the reason he says, is to cover up the criminality of long-term care policy is one reason. Dozens of Ontario nursing homes patients died of dehydration and neglect, not COVID-19, military report finds. And I was just going to leave it here because I thought, that's enough. Like a sitting MPP saying this is what this Globe and Mail article says is enough. And it's not. I know it's not. People will say, oh, that's just Randy Hillier, blah, blah, blah. But I'll show you the article in a second. Dozens of residents in 2 Ontario nursing homes hit hard by the coronavirus died not from COVID-19, but from dehydration and neglect, the Canadian military says in a report obtained by the Globe and Mail. That's sad. It's sad. It's terrible. My mom worked in old folks' home. You send your parents to old folks' home if you don't have another option, or you send them to a nice one if that's where they want to go and they have the money for it and all of that other fun stuff. And to have people die of neglect in that situation is not how it's supposed to play out. That's terrible. I wonder if there'll be a class action lawsuit. Globe and Mail is reporting patients died from neglect, not COVID-19, in Ontario long-term care homes. A military report finds, quote, all they needed was water and a wipe down. Awful, right? Dozens of residents in 2 Ontario nursing homes hit hard by the coronavirus died not from COVID-19, but from dehydration and neglect, the Canadian military says in reports obtained by the Globe and Mail. The documents contained new details about the deplorable conditions in 2 Toronto homes before the forces stepped in last year, revealing for the first time that causes other than COVID-19 hastened the death of residents as outbreaks spiraled out of control and staffing collapsed. So that's something that we did. Something that as a society, instead of taking care of the people who needed to be taken care of, we panicked and failed them. And that's on our leadership. That's on Christine Elliott. That's on Doug Ford. That's on the people who failed. But as a society, we're allowing the continued compounding of these errors to continue. These people in charge clearly don't know what they're doing. The people in charge clearly aren't interested in fixing it. It's been a year, and the only option that we have is lockdown from everyone. That's it? And that's acceptable to who? I don't think so. Here's Chris Sally moving into mismanagement. This is just to end the YouTube segment, then we'll go over to the redacted segment. Chris Sally says, boy, is there ever a lot going on in this very brief article. Remember COVID hotels? Those were supposed to be safe havens meant to stop the COVID-19, the disease, the virus getting into Canada, right? These are supposed to be like a firewall before people just get let go into the public. Right, except that it doesn't work at all. And now there's infections in the COVID hotels. So, yay? You're just like signing up to go to a place where there definitely is COVID, for sure, and you're not told about it. Huh. Okay, the first thing to note, says Chris Sally, is that arriving travelers had no access to the information that the quarantine hotel that they were forced to book was swimming with COVID-19. I don't know, seems problematic, says Chris. Last week, the city revealed that 13 workers at the Crown Plaza Toronto Airport had tested positive. At the time, the Toronto Public Health said the Crown Plaza wouldn't be ordered to fully close despite the outbreak because it provides an essential service to keep Torontonians safe. So if you've got a business or a warehouse that has 5+ cases of COVID, you have to shut down. But if you run isolation hotel and you have 19+ cases, not only do you not have to tell arriving travelers that there are a bunch of cases of COVID at your isolation hotel, but you get to keep running because you are an essential service that is providing an essential safety mechanism to Torontonians. It's parody. It's funny and horrific. But it's funny and horrific, right? Funny because we're still tolerating it. Everybody's like, this is fine. This seems good. This seems all right. And just wait till the election. Whew, your jaws are going to be on the floor. Whew, look, the majority is going to be like 181, 179. It'll be about the same. It'll be awful. But it doesn't matter because the majority is already there. It's already in place, right? Jagmeet Singh is a liberal by backbench, right? Same with all of the NDP caucus, and sometimes the bloc is liberal backbenching too. Here is the 3 geese radius, and he's writing an article in the Toronto Star as well. This seems to be standard practice currently in Toronto Star articles, getting the meat of the article out and trying to get people to click on it after, I guess. I don't know. I don't mind it though. It's all right. He says, in the Toronto Star, I argue, this guy, not me, the self-imposed ability to disagree with the medical officer of health, mostly by progressive counselors, is bad for democracy and bad for public health itself. And in interaction with a counselor on this website last week really brought into the focus how unreasoned the position is. Disagreeing with the medical officer of health is what Doug Ford would do. This fundamentally misreads the situation. I couldn't act like Doug Ford because Doug Ford would do that, and I don't do things that Doug Ford would do. Are you eating a hamburger? Checkmate. Okay, it's not in bad faith, but it's very bad politics. We need critics of public health who believe in public health in the first place. Communications has long been a problem. If more robust stories were shared, either public pressure on workplace spread might have come earlier. I mean, and then he's got a comment there, but he says, and he tweets this, or he links this tweet, asked about people worried that if government makes a bad decision or COVID throws another curveball, Dr. Williams says, I don't know what you mean by bad decision. How do you quantify that? Government making bad decision? I'm not sure that computes, right? Ultimately, it was park booze, so drinking in parks, that brought this to a head, and mealy and paternalistic responses pledging support but deferring to the medical officer of health. But 1 year into this, if people who believe in public health can't disagree, the critics become those who don't believe in public health at all. I don't know how at the end of all this, you could look at these people and think competence reigns, right? Like, I just don't get it. I don't get it, right? The total mismanagement of this has just been astounding from every level. It's been a year of 2 weeks to flatten the curve. That seems reasonable to us. Hey, everybody, let's have a contest, right? Like, how many times will you fall for 2 more weeks, right? It's just been extended to June 2nd. How many times? Let's have a contest, right? Count the number of gun balls in this Twitter post, right? Like, yay. Dan Kelly, to continue our mismanagement parade, says, I congratulate the Ontario government for finally rolling out rapid testing to SMEs across the province. I call on the province to allow these tests to help phase out blanket lockdowns on May 20th. I don't want my health to be farmed out to a faulty test, ever. My health is my responsibility, not somebody else's or some test's responsibility. If I'm sick, I'll get sick enough to go to the hospital, and then you can start doing tests on me. But if you want me to do a test to go to the Boston Pizza, or to go to the McDonald's, or to go to a hair salon, not happening. And that's not freedom. That is removing your body agency, removing your freedom, unless you comply with this testing regime. It is not free. It does not belong in a Western society. It does not belong at all in Canada. And yet here we are. We're on the cusp of it, where the president of the CFIB is saying, you know what we got to do? Everybody's got to get tested. Look at these rapid tests. They work in other places. Let's use them here. We have lost ourselves to this. This panic has completely decimated the basic rights in this country, the rule of law in this country, the basic decency in this country, common sense, education, healthcare, judiciary, destroyed by COVID-19. What does it do symptom-wise? A little cough, a little throat tickle. I couldn't taste anything. That's what I hear. I don't know. Who knows? Incompetence, mismanagement, unbelievable. Roman Bauer says, needless. Order canceled elective surgeries applies to ambulatory patients who can walk, who do not need a bed. Why? This is 2 hours ago. Dr. Nam, for cancer patients waiting for treatment, hopes to beat the disease were severely harmed by the stroke of a pen. Why? Mismanagement, total mismanagement. Why would you do this? How could you do this to people, right? There's no reason for this. We're protecting this person who's definitely going to die of cancer because of our inaction, but that won't die of COVID-19 because of our action. Okay. Weird, right? That's a weird place to live. Okay, we're going to head over to the Redacted channel now, which is basically just the rest of the show on BitChute or Rumble or Odysee. And and on the podcast, etc. So thanks for watching, everybody. If you are going to stop watching here, check out CanadaPoly.com, check out CanadaReport.co, check out SpeakingMoistly.co, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. And if you want to head over to Redacted, then we'll see you in just a second.